we're going to talk about those things today, everyone. It's going to be a fun and exciting time here on this program, and all of these other shows as well. And yes, I did, in fact, make Vinny watch Urban Wrestling Federation.
Make is a good word.
Once Steve Carroll actually came on the program and explained that it was supposed to be Grand Theft Auto with a little wrestling in there, then I understood it. You know? There was a shooting at the end.
That's not the part that bothered me. I was fine with the gunplay.
Oh, my God. So, yeah, tell us about this show.
Show opened with Gina Torres of allhiphop.com telling us that Uncle Murder had been arrested.
I think it's Murda, but that's okay.
No, not anymore.
Either Uncle Murder?
No, because Uncle Murda is not silly at all. Point being, I don't know who this is.
I am so madly entertained that you are reviewing this show. And it started out with talk of Uncle Murder being arrested.
So, we got graphics telling us this was Steve the Hustler's Urban Wrestling Federation.
The Hustler.
And all I could think was, perhaps there was someone on the fence. They didn't know if they were going to get the Urban Wrestling Federation show. And then they saw it was Steve the Hustler. Now, I put my money down for this one then.
Mm-hmm.
So there were two black guys backstage talking to a white man who may have been Stevie J. Speaking of Steves.
It's funny that you wrote in your report here, two black men were talking to a white man backstage. I believe that was the exact word-for-word thing that I typed.
Is there anything else? There was nothing else to describe this man.
It's like, as writers...
Okay, go ahead.
As a writer, there's no other way to explain what we just saw.
No.
I don't know who the men were.
No.
I mean, in trying to explain it to the reader, all I could say was there were two men who were black,
yes,
and they were talking to a man who was white. That's all I could say about this.
Steve the Hustler, who is the one who may be Stevie J. White man, older than me, mustache, he was talking. I understood about 20% of what he said. They were mumbling a lot. Talked about Detroit, Miami, and Chicago and putting money in his pockets. So it was important Murder was with them, and they went their separate ways. We had a graphic identifying the ring announcer as Larry Legend.
That was good. A graphic.
They came and went. We had lowlife Louis Ramos versus someone who I just described as the opponent.
X.
You know what I put X thinking I would go back later and write what the man's name was. I never got
good.
But he came out. He had a steel chair. He hit Louis Ramos in the head with it half a dozen times. It was bent like Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka. And you'll recall that Mike Awesome was currently dead because he was hitting the head with a chair so many times. He stabbed Louis with a fork for a while. And then he cut a promo. As he was talking, the announcers never stopped talking. They all just mumbled over each other. The opponent said he represented the ATL. He brought
the opponent, he wrote.
Capital T, capital O.
It actually would be a hell of a name for a wrestler.
The opponent.
Yeah.
He represented the ATL. He brought out Ruckus, Grim Reaper, and Big Block. They had graphics for this. They said they came out to get that money. Out came Uncle Murda. It was Murda, you're right. Because they had a graphic for this too. I almost said EC Negro. Well, it could have been. EC Negro, I prefer Luchador. And Casey Blade. Blade and Negro were wearing Yankees jerseys, and Negro was smart enough to put his name on the back of the jersey.
That's good.
Wise man here.
Now, let me get this straight. Are you sure that Uncle Murda came out?
No.
Okay, because I had this, when I watched the show, I thought they kept talking about Uncle Murda, but he never showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he was here, and I just don't know who he was.
I don't know. All I know, because for the whole thing's built around turf wars, and each turf, whether it's Atlanta or Miami or New York or Brooklyn or I think it was Chicago, but they each have a different spokesman. I guess they're rappers. I don't know. But, Uncle Murda may have been the rapper for the New York crew, and he may have never showed up. I don't know.
Because I could have sworn he was in jail.
That's
what they said at the beginning.
Yeah. So, as these guys were yapping back and forth, out came Briscoe, Dope, and Creed. They were from Florida. So, the guy from Florida said he was fucking all the Atlanta and New York bitches. Then men began to battle. Ruckus did some spots. The announcer said things like, nice driver there from Dope. The announcers called the Grim Reaper a crazy white boy, which is true. One announcer said you had to do whatever was necessary to pick up the victory, including pull hair, raking eyes, or, quote, stab him.
Stab him.
Stab him. Ruckus and Reaper did a bunch of flip dives and stuff. They started doing some crazy double teams. There was a scary 3D-like move.
Nobody will believe me if I say I'm going to watch the show a third time.
No. Not sober.
I may actually drink and watch the show a third time.
There was a scary 3D move, very scary double powerbomb in the turnbuckles. And then the New York crew, Blade and Negro, they hit a scary double pile driver. And then they began to celebrate. And while they were celebrating, one of the Atlanta dudes dove in behind their backs and stole the pin. The Atlanta crew was apparently known as the Ghetto Mafia. They all celebrated backstage.
These matches were fine.
Wrestling by and large, yeah, honestly.
Yeah, I had no problem with any of the wrestling. I just never knew what the fuck was happening.
No. So there was 3 men on the street. I identified 2 of these men as white dudes. Then halfway through the promo, I realized, wait a minute, that's the fucking SATs, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the SATs.
They're not white. So I have no idea what they're talking about, except there was a bridge, and anyone who would cross this bridge would get beat up.
I never knew that things were so rough in other parts of the country. Like, they're not allowed to cross their bridge or you'll get beat up.
Well, did you see the bridge, too?
I didn't see
this
the
is
bridge.
not like a one-lane footpath. I think it was the goddamn Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh,
well,
I see.
Yes.
So if they came into Brooklyn, they'd be in trouble. I understand that.
2 dudes got in the car for a chat. They sat there and mumbled for a while.
Mumbled is the operative word.
One guy passed the other envelope. They talked about Red Cafe, was what I believe his name was, but I'm pretty sure that was the black guy hanging out with the SATs. They said they needed the title, and it was about that money. This went on too goddamn long. We had a multiracial crew discussing titties and ass. Another one came in, demanded his money. The guy who was supposed to have the money didn't have it. They all mumbled together. The guy who was owed money did the absolute worst ripoff of Joe Pesci's speech from Goodfellas ever, and he sent the crew to go get his fucking money. A man was talking on the phone. A larger man walked up and shoved the small man into a wall, laid him out with a running knee strike, and continued on his way.
That's a different one. Somebody
else walked past, shook his head, and went into a door. He saw a man and said, "What the fuck?" And they both ran out. What in the hell was that?
I don't know.
So the ring announcer tried to introduce the 2 men who will be fighting the next encounter, and they did not bother to let their names be read because they came out fighting. There was a white guy with blonde dreadlocks. There was a Mexican. The white guy with blonde dreadlocks, the more he wrestled, the more I realized this man is an RVD knockoff. Then I watched him and I thought, you know what? Actually, he is more coordinated than Rob Van Dam. He's much smaller and less... in other ways, less athletic, but his body control is far superior. I believe the announcers refer to this as Ultimate Toe Jam. That's the best I could get.
I did hear Toe Jam in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
One of them also said Urban Wrestling Federation is the best in the world right now. A lie. They did chair shots to the back, all kinds of stuff with the chair. Eventually, there's a table on the floor, and the dreadlock dude tried to somewhat like a rope walk into a Rana, but he got powerbombed hard off the apron through the table, and this was the pin. Yeah. Whoever was talking, I have no earthly idea who it was, but he was, to this point, far and away the best talker on the show. You never guessed this, but he wanted his money.
Yeah.
So they beat Bestia up. I believe one of these men was named Cheese. They were beating him up. The guy in the mic had to warn his men, literally warn them, don't kill him.
Yeah.
And one of them was apparently pressing Bestia over his head for a long time, but we barely saw this because the camera was focused on the hot girl at ringside.
Which was fine.
She's pretty hot. There were a lot of hot girls. Actually, the last one was the hottest, but there were a lot of hot girls in the show. And they left. They carried Bestia over their shoulder. The announcers were on camera for literally 3 seconds. Stevie J met with a man who may have been Chris Johnson of the Tennessee Titans. Actually, we later learned that apparently this was someone named Melly Mel, one of the very few people whose names I got from the show. Men argued on the street. They didn't know who each other were, but they were willing to fight. A bus drove by. That is not poetry, everyone. That is not meant to be a lyric. That is what happened.
That's what happened.
Homicide appeared on television, and I was thrilled to see someone with actual talent. He cut a promo. He was talking about having more bitches and money than Eddie Kingston. I sincerely hope that is true. He is so ridiculously head and shoulders above the rest of this show. Melly Mel was giving Eddie Kingston a pep talk, telling him Homicide was fucking his bitches.
This is where the show really started to turn around for me.
This did actually turn it turned an amazing corner at this point.
This show was built for Homicide and Eddie Kingston. You know what I mean?
In a lot of ways.
They should be there cutting promos on each other about who is fucking whose bitches.
Yeah.
That's great.
And getting that money. So, Eddie Kingston said he had been compared to Homicide for 9 years. In what way? They wrestle. That's like all he got. And he did. I'm not joking about this part. He did say he wanted money.
I did love how Eddie Kingston said everywhere he went, and then his examples of places that he went.
Strip clubs. Auto shows.
Auto shows. I fucking howled.
Well, I believe those are the kinds of places Eddie Kingston would go. So, yes, Eddie Kingston versus Homicide in the main event. Melly Mel was out there. He had the biggest arms in the show. Announcer said Homicide was about his money. Eddie Kingston in this match was a fantastic heel. He was completely willing to make himself look like a geek for our entertainment.
Yeah.
They were brawling on the floor, trading chops. Homicide gave him an eye poke. He did the funniest sell of an eye poke I've ever seen. Worth the price of admission right there. Homicide beat him up forever. Kingston cut him off. They brawled on the floor. They had a chop fest. Usually when you do a chop fest, you know, one guy will hit the first guy really hard and they'll switch places and just repeat. Homicide hit a bunch of chops, and Kingston told them like he was on fire. Then finally, Kingston cut him off, and he threw Homicide into the corner, and he started laying in chops like Kibashi, just as fast as he could go, bam, bam, bam. And Homicide is standing like straight up, not even reacting or flinching, and staring at this man with a blank expression. Just no, something is not a strong enough word. He was non-registering these chops.
Yes.
So Kingston stopped, and he looked at him, and he just kept on chopping.
Kept trying.
Was not going to give up.
He's not going to quit.
Dozens and dozens and dozens of chops. None of them had any effect, and finally Homicide just grabbed him and chopped him back. That made me laugh. So Kingston came back. He hit a backdrop driver, dropped Homicide right on his brain. Homicide fought back, hit a top rope ace crusher, and then ended Kingston's life with a cop killer. Bad. Yeah. A bad cop killer.
Well, depends on what you consider bad. It was bad.
Bad if you were Eddie Kingston.
Yeah.
So, it was a good match, and on this particular show, it seemed like Flair Steamboat at their absolute peak. So then here was where the, I don't know, guys were talking or whatever. There was a girl in the apron, and the camera just zoomed in on her ass, and this could have been up there for another hour, and I would not have complained. All right, here... It was probably like 3 minutes of the show. The last 3 minutes of the show was like a bad NyQuil trip. I'll go back to reading things verbatim. Red Cafe's boys ran into Uncle Murda's boy. They yelled at each other for a while.
You got way more of that than I did.
Well, I think it was the SATs. That's all I know.
I see.
And Uncle Murda's boy, by the way, may have been Zeus. Not certain. Never saw his face, I don't think. Next segment. Kingston was storming through the backstage screaming and swearing. He said this was far from over.
He just goes, shit. What did he say? Fuck you. Shit.
I think, fuck was the first one.
It was fuck you. I remember that. He stumbled in holding his head. He'd just been cop killed. So they had a camera backstage. And he stumbles in and goes, fuck you. Shit.
Black men shouted in darkness somewhere. They were making money. A guy came up with, quote, dope money. Then a fight broke out.
The fight broke out, and it's pitch black, and you just hear, punk motherfucker, fuck you, and the sound of, fuck off. It's quite a brawl.
Somebody opened the back of their truck, then closed it. Another fight broke out. Next segment. Men shouted at each other.
He forgot about the man that was thrown into the car.
I did forget that part.
It's funny, because I remember seeing this, but when I saw it the second time, I realized they threw a man into the trunk of the car. So you think, okay, well, they're going to abduct this fella. But they threw him into the trunk of the car and then just ran away.
And I believe he was the same guy that opened it, so I think this was his car.
Well, that'll teach him.
To what?
I don't know. To give them their fucking money.
I guess that's it. Men shouted at each other. At least now it was in a well-lit club. Two of them inexplicably ran outside.
Now was one of those two men homicide?
I have
Because
no
upon second
idea.
viewing, I think homicide was one of the men who ran outside. Yeah.
I have no idea. I did not know this, but this was now in broad daylight. Two of them inexplicably ran outside, got in a car, and drove away. The others followed, running into the streets and opening fire.
Opening fire.
Yes, with a handgun. As the bullets flew, the words "Copyright Urban Wrestling" flashed on the bottom of the screen, and it ended. I swear to God, we spent more time talking about it than all. Those last 5 segments flew by, in fact, it may have been 2 minutes.
This show.
Just a mess.
This show. It's funny because, like, when the show started, it's urban wrestling, and there's a bunch of dudes swearing, and they want their money, but they never actually, they never get to the drug issue or anything like that. So I'm thinking, are we supposed to read between the lines here for this entire show? And then I will say this about the show: it built well. By the end of the show, they flat out were talking about drugs, and they were trying to shoot fuckers.